Welcome to the Mentally Fit Farmer channel. I'm your host, Mark Weisenburger. Today, we are going to take a break from stress resilience. Yes, you heard me right. You've heard me talk a little bit about my dad and used him for some examples and whatever. And so I just wanted to take a break and share the story about my dad, how he got started, where he got started in farming, and just let you know the background from him. And we'll get into that right after this. Hello, Mark Weisenburger here. I'm standing in what's known as South Pleasant Valley, west of American Falls, Idaho. When my dad first got started farming, he was working for a farmer on the west side of American Falls by the name of Terry. And Terry was renting ground and borrowing money from a gentleman by the name of Porter. And every time Porter would show up to the shop, Terry would run and hide and tell my dad to tell Porter that he wasn't around. I guess Terry didn't understand that Porter could see his pickup out front of the shop. But anyway, one day Porter asked my dad, he said, "Cecil, why don't you farm instead of working for Terry?" And my dad said, "Well, I don't have any money. I can't afford to farm." And Porter said, "You know what? I financed Terry, and I would a lot sooner finance you, and I'll rent you my ground." And so my dad took him up on that offer. And he farmed out on the west side of American Falls for 2 or 3 years. And then he had the opportunity to come out here to South Pleasant Valley and to buy about 380 acres that you see behind me. And I was probably 4 or 5 years old at that time. So that's been, 55 plus years ago. And when my dad bought this land out here, everything out here was dryland wheat, producing 15 to 18 bushel per acre wheat. How would you like to pay for that new John Deere X9 combine with that crop? But anyway, it was all sagebrush and or that dryland wheat. And there was no irrigation out here. And that wind's picking up, so I hope the mic is blocking the sound here, or blocking it for us. And so he wanted to drill a well, and he'd go into the cafe in town, and all the farmers around he could hear him saying, "Oh, Cecil Weisenburger, he's going to go broke. He thinks there is water out there in Pleasant Valley." And it made him nervous. And I was stood up here on this hill because there's 2 wells kind of down behind me. And you can't really see them very well in this video. I was hoping you could. But there was 2 wells down there. And my dad after listening to all the naysayers in town at the coffee shop and cafe, he started getting a little worried on if he would be able to find water out here. And he did not believe in water witching. However, he got so nervous he decided he better find a water witcher and see if he could find water out here under the ground. So he had a place down there where he wanted to drill the well, and brought the water witcher out here and said, "This is where I want it." And the witcher said, "No, there's no water here." And the witcher walked and walked. It's probably 30, 40 yards away from the spot where my dad wanted that well. And the witcher said, "Right here. Here is the water." And my dad said, "I don't want it here. I want it over there. Otherwise, my field won't be square here." And the witcher said, "Well, if you drill it over there, you won't find any water." So my dad drilled where the witcher told him, and he found water. And my dad started irrigating this farm out here. He was the very first one to irrigate that. And after he found water, this area, South Central and North Pleasant Valley, just exploded with drilling rigs and farmers turning their dryland crop into irrigated. And so anyway, my dad, when he moved out here, just about 40 yards to my right, he built a house, and that's where I grew up until he built another home down the road about another mile from here. But during his time, after he got this developed and was ready to expand, he bought 160 acres kind of over behind me to the right, just a mile or so away from here. And then a few years later, just a half mile down here, he bought another 320, and half of that was dry land and half of it was sagebrush. He had to break 160 acres out of sagebrush and turn that into farmland. And so, of course, he planted potatoes in that, and then he bought what we called the far place, which is about 4 or 5 miles from here. So in today's standards, that's not too far away to have a farm, but back in the day, that was a really long ways to have to drive your tractors and equipment. But we had a total of about 1,100 acres out here. And but people were so happy that my dad took the risk and drilled this well out here and started farming, because it changed the economy of this whole Pleasant Valley. It changed the economy of American Falls, and it was just a huge boom to this whole area. And there used to be a couple brothers, and I won't say their names, but they used to say, "Cecil, you pioneered this area out here. Without you, we'd still be dry farming a dryland wheat at 15 bushels per acre." And so my dad made a big impact out here and was well known for that. And you know, later on, when I was about 21, 22, we went 40 miles away from here and bought a 2,200 acre dryland wheat farm up in the mountains, where there really wasn't any water. We built a shop and we drilled a well out there for the shop, and so we could spray and stuff. And we went like 300-400 feet out there, and all we got was a well that would produce 6 gallons of water per minute, which is not very much, as you know. But one thing that's interesting out here on this particular farm where I'm at, down here, you know, at 380 acres, that was too much for one well, but my dad had a booster pump on it. And after he had bought all this other land out here and had developed that and taken that from dry land to irrigated, he came back to put a second well on this place so that he had the water that he wanted. And he went back and showed the well driller where he wanted the well dug. And it was exactly where he wanted the first one drilled. And he said, "I was told there was no water here, and I won't be happy if there's not any water here, but I'm not going to go broke. And so I can stand a mistake if there's not any water." So they drilled that well, and sure enough, there was water there. It was actually 20 feet shallower than the first well he dug. So we went through here, and of course, I've mentioned some of my dad's stories on how he got out of farming. I'd left the farm, and most of my other brothers had, so he went ahead and retired. He moved to town and became a mayor, and was mayor for one term. And I'd come back to class reunions and visit my friends and whatever, and they'd all say, "You know, I didn't vote for your dad, but he's doing a good job. I'm really impressed with what he's doing with this town." But Anyway, that's the story of my dad, and we'll bring more stories with him as we go along, and more stories of how I grew up in this area. And so until next time, to your stress resilience.